So welcome again to our webinar about the Massachusetts Parentage Act. And my name is Kate Weldon LeBlanc. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm really happy to be here on behalf of our Massachusetts Parentage Coalition and to be acting as your informal moderator, and I emphasis on informal today. This is not my normal gig, but I am happy to do it for this great group and this great cause. So as I said, this isn't a webinar format, so we cannot see you, unfortunately. I wish we could, but we're very happy to have you here. But please put your name, your pronouns, the city and town that you live in, the organization that you work for, if applicable, in the chat. Any or all of that information in the chat would be great, because we would love to feel like we're with you virtually today. And we really do plan to have this be sort of like our first meeting that's like this, that brings more of us together that care about this bill. And future meetings like this will not be webinars. They will be meetings where we all can see each other and interact more in real time. But we felt like this was great just as a first kickoff to share some information and kind of get us really geared up for the advocacy that lies ahead. So as I said, I'm Kate, and I am really proud to be part of the Mass Parentage Coalition. I'm also the executive director of a nonprofit called Resolve New England, and we provide support, education, and advocacy for anyone and everyone in New England that is struggling to grow their families. And I myself am a parent through IVF, and so I'm really happy to be here with all of you virtually today. So we wanted to come together on this very hot June 30th to close out Pride Month by discussing the Mass Parentage Act and by, as I said, really focusing on what all of us can do to make this bill a reality this session in Massachusetts. So just very briefly, for those that don't know, or all of us can probably use a reminder, parentage is the legal parent-child relationship. And as we all know, and as many of us reflected on this call represent, there are many paths to parenthood, but Massachusetts law has not kept up with the diversity of families that exist in the Commonwealth today. And our state is not alone in that respect. Many states needed and need to do updates to get more up to date, but unfortunately, we are alone in terms of being the last state in New England to update our parentage laws. And as many of you know, Massachusetts does not like to be last on something as wonderful and important as this. We actually like to be first. We like to be leaders on things like this. So, because unfortunately, the fact that these laws are not up to date leave many children vulnerable in Massachusetts. And that is really at the heart of what we are advocating for, is the children who don't have that security of the legal protections for the people that they consider their parents. So as I said again, this is a webinar format, but we do want this to be a dialogue. So please put your questions in the Q&A box. You can also make comments in the chat, and I will be trying to keep up with them. We also have wonderful colleagues here from the Mass Parentage Coalition and GLAAD that are helping us keep track of those questions in the chat. And we'll try to get to them as much as we can, but also we will be able to address them in other ways as well, which we'll talk about as the conversation goes on. We have a wonderful website devoted to the Mass Parentage Act. That's massparentage.com. Oh, wow, that was crazy. That just timing was perfect that I saw that just go in the chat as I said that. So that's always a great resource, and that'll be another place where we answer questions that we can't get to today. So basically, we need to get this done this session. We need to protect all the children and all the richly beautiful, diverse families that exist in Massachusetts. So before I turn it over to my friend and colleague, Paulie Crozier, I am gonna have the pleasure of just introducing a video that we received from Senator Julian Cyr, who is a state senator that is a co-sponsor of the Massachusetts Parentage Act this session, and again, really wanted to help us celebrate the end of Pride Month by briefly describing why he is a strong supporter of the MPA. So I think Ivory is going to help me, yes, technology-wise, and show Senator Cyr's video. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Julian Cyr, and I represent Cape Cod, Martha's Vineyard, and Nantucket in the Massachusetts Senate. And I'm here today to talk about why I enthusiastically support the Massachusetts Parentage Act. Look, what our families look like, what they're comprised of, increasingly is reflective of the diversity of the human experience. But Massachusetts law just simply hasn't kept up. And I knew this firsthand, not only as an LGBTQ person, but my sister and sister-in-law, when they successfully, but we're starting to explore having a family, the pitfalls, the hurdles, just the lack of sort of scientific savvy about how and who is able to create and build families was just so apparent. They were able to navigate it and figure it out, and they have a pretty precocious, amazing 2-year-old, and they're making plans for another. But really, I think for me, that experience, my family's experience, reiterated why we've got to get our act together in Massachusetts. Our peer states have passed parentage laws. It's long time that we do our part here in Massachusetts in having inclusive parentage statute. And that's why I'm a huge, enthusiastic, big supporter of the Massachusetts Parentage Act. So thank you so much for having me today, and good luck with the rest of your program. Take care.
That was great. And thank you, Senator Cyr, in absentia. But also what really struck me with the senator's video is something that I was thinking about a lot in preparation for today, which is that each of us, the most powerful tool we have are our own personal stories, because when we share our connection to this and why this matters to us, that is so powerful. And as you heard, I mean, Senator Cyr is a steadfast supporter of LGBTQ rights and many other progressive causes. But I think what really took this issue from the theoretical to the, strong commitment that he has today was the personal experience that he saw with his own family and with his own sister's family. So that really speaks to what we're talking about today, which is that all of us have a powerful contribution to make with our own story. So now I am so pleased to pass the mic, so to speak, over to Paulie Crozier from GLAAD.
Thank you so much, Kate. My name is Paulie Crozier. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am an attorney at GLAAD, but I'm also really connected to this issue in so many ways. Professionally, as a lawyer at GLAAD, I've worked on parentage equality throughout New England, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. Before I worked at GLAAD, I was a family lawyer, and for over 2 decades, I worked with families securing their children, particularly children of LGBTQ families. And personally, I am the non-biological parent of 2 children who I had to adopt myself, and worry about those holes in the protections as well. So I'm really passionate about this issue. I'm so thrilled you showed up. I'm really looking forward to doing my job here today, which is the brief legal overview. I'm going to try not to legal you too much, but just a little overview of the bill, what it does, what the needs are, why it's important. Most of this information can be found on our website, but I'm here to give you a brief overview, and I'm also available to any coalition members at any time to answer questions, to talk about things in more detail, because this is an incredibly important bill with a lot of detailed issues in it, and we are here to support you in your advocacy. So let's jump into it. I'm going to share my screen. All right, here we go. So an important first step, here are the bill numbers, S1133 and H1714. Those are the keys. Those are the 2 bills we're advocating for, mirror image bills in the Massachusetts Senate and the Massachusetts House of Representatives. Okay, and I always love to start with this slide because this is a slide of 2 of our coalition families, right? And that's what is the heart of this work, in the heart of this bill, which is the experiences of LGBTQ families and of all families in Massachusetts, and particularly children, because at the heart of this is securing children and making sure that every child has an equal path to the security of legal parentage. So thankful to our coalition members who shared their stories on our website and continue to advocate for the bill. Okay. So here's a little bit about the need for the Massachusetts Parentage Act. First of all, right now in Massachusetts, as Senator Cyr so well said, our families have outpaced the law. First and foremost, our paternity statutes are outdated. They're paternity statutes. They talk about mother, father, they're not inclusive, and they're very focused on genetic connection when we know that there are so many ways that people are parents to their children. So that is one issue that we need to fix, to make sure that our parentage statutes address all families and are inclusive, regardless of the gender of the parents, sexual orientation of the parents, or the circumstances of the children's birth. There's also, right now in Massachusetts, no statutory protections for children born to unmarried people through assisted reproduction. In fact, there's only one small statute, short statute, about assisted reproduction and parentage in the whole state. And Massachusetts is the state with the number one amount of births to assisted reproduction in the country. So this is really a hole in protections for many children in the state. There's no statutory protections for children born through surrogacy. And we do not have truly expansive access to voluntary acknowledgments of parentage in Massachusetts, which we'll talk a little bit more about because I think it's such an incredibly important aspect of the bill. And what people are experiencing in Massachusetts courts are significant delays in accessing parentage protections because there's no consistent standards for courts to apply. And some people wait for years to secure their most foundational relationship to their child. And what do these holes mean for families? Like, they cause tremendous harm. In my practice at GLAAD, in my practice before GLAAD, I represented parents and children who really suffered tremendously. I represented a mother whose child was kidnapped out of state, and we had to fight for 2 years to get the child returned to Massachusetts because the status of her parentage wasn't clear under the statutes. I've represented a mother who had her child removed by the Department of Children and Families, and the child was in foster care for almost 2 years because it wasn't clear that she was a legal parent, even though there was a case discussing her parentage status, but it wasn't clear in the statutes, and she didn't have access to counsel or an opportunity to participate in the initial proceedings about the removal of her child. So those are just two examples of how the outdated statutes are really creating harms for our children and our families, particularly in the LGBTQ community. Okay, but turning to some kind of better news, which is we have made, in working in coalition throughout New England, tremendous progress over the past 5 years. And essentially every New England state has passed comprehensive parentage reforms along the lines of what is proposed in the Massachusetts Parentage Act. Just recently, on June 1st, Connecticut signed into law comprehensive protections. And Maine actually expanded access to voluntary acknowledgments of parentage just last week, so that Maine's law is truly comprehensive. So I think we have shown the power of our voices, of our families, of showing legislatures how important it is to move these protections forward. And we've had tremendous success, and we're hoping to carry that success into Massachusetts, because as Kate said, Massachusetts is the only state in New England that has not enacted comprehensive statutory reform. Okay, and here's a little brief overview of our coalition. Thank you so much to everyone who's already signed up to join the coalition. It's a fantastic group, and it continues to grow. And for those of you whose organization hasn't signed on or joined, I'd love to engage with you, answer any questions you have. It is a wonderful group. These are the organizational members, and we also have individuals and family members as well, whose individual names we don't reflect, but it is a wonderful coalition of over 30 organizations and families strong, and we are just so excited and grateful for all of these contributions. Okay, so what are the goals of the Massachusetts Parentage Act? They're pretty straightforward. We want equality for all children. We want to make sure that our statutes are constitutional, because at this point they're not, because they don't protect all children equally. We want improved access to the protections of legal parentage. People shouldn't have to necessarily go to court to protect their children. They should be able to protect their children as close to birth as possible without going through an adversarial process in court. And we want to give greater guidance to the courts so that there's consistency throughout the Commonwealth for families who want to secure their children. So those are some of the key goals. And really at the heart of this is making sure that all children are protected to the people they know as parents. Okay. And what is the bill based on? I want to just give you a little bit of background about this. I could talk about it all day long. I'm not going to, but it's based on something called the Uniform Parentage Act of 2017. A majority of the states in the country have laws based on the Uniform Parentage Act, right? Which is put together by a national group of experts, nonpartisan group of experts to recommend to the states, here's what fair family law looks like. And in 2017, this Uniform Act was updated to reflect marriage equality and to make sure that children of LGBTQ couples are protected. And this is what this bill in Massachusetts is based on. And it ensures that we want to ensure gender equality, constitutionality of our statutes, expanded access to an administrative route to parentage, a way to resolve competing claims of parentage, because oftentimes there's more than two people who say they're parents of a child, and we want to give the courts guidance on how to resolve those issues. And it also updated surrogacy provisions to make sure that parentage laws are reflecting modern science. Okay, and so here are a few key highlights of the bill. Again, the bill can be accessed online, it's on our website, but here's just a few highlights, which is it clarifies who can be a parent and how you establish parentage. And make sure that our paternity statutes are no longer gendered and are inclusive of all families. It adds provisions to our law to protect children born through assisted reproduction and surrogacy. What it doesn't do, it doesn't change any of the laws about custody, parenting time, visitation, or child support. So it only really addresses who can be a parent and how do you establish parentage. And we have been incredibly lucky in Massachusetts to really call on incredibly expert people to help drafting the bill. One of the leading constitutional law scholars in the country from Yale Law School, the person who drafted the Uniform Parentage Act of 2017, the leader of the American Bar Association's section on assisted reproduction. We've really had wonderful expertise in crafting this statute and making sure it fits the needs of Massachusetts. Okay, so a few more highlights. The bill, here are the paths to parentage that the bill talks about and sets standards for. Birth, right? Because there's no statute currently in Massachusetts that says if you give birth to a child, you are that child's parent. Presumption, adjudication, which is a court adjudication, acknowledgement, de facto parentage, consent to assisted reproduction, and through a surrogacy agreement. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about two of these aspects because we got some questions in advance from the audience. So I wanted to make sure I talk about in depth a little bit about two of those paths to parentage. And the first path is, sorry, you can't see that very well on the webinar, voluntary acknowledgments of parentage. This is an incredible piece of this legislation that I think is so important. Federal law requires every state to have a simple administrative process to establish parentage at birth, i.e. a voluntary acknowledgement of parentage. It's a form you sign in the hospital, you know, one form and your parentage is established. It's the equivalent of a court decree and it is recognized throughout the United States. Most states only allow mothers and genetic fathers to sign this form. And the Uniform Parentage Act of 2017 recommended states to expand access to this mechanism for establishing parentage so that presumed parents, i.e. marital parents, and parents of children born through assisted reproduction who aren't necessarily genetic parents can also use this path to parentage, because this means you don't have to hire an attorney, you don't have to go to court, and you can secure your children in the hospital at birth as soon after birth as possible. It's really a tremendous protection for our families. Massachusetts has actually, through administrative advocacy that GLAAD participated in, expanded access to unmarried LGBTQ parents in 2018, but this bill would ensure expand access to voluntary acknowledgments for more families, including married LGBTQ families. 10 states have this protection. It's incredibly important and would obviate the need for folks to have to rush out and get a co-parent adoption because, again, it is the equivalent of a court degree of parentage. Okay. And then the next piece I want to talk a little bit about is de facto parentage, which Jay, who's our parent representative, thank you so much, Jay, is going to talk about her experience in a minute, which is de facto parentage has existed in Massachusetts since 1999. It's essentially a parent status that was created by the court to say when someone has acted as a parent, has fulfilled that permanent parental role after a child's birth, done the caretaking for that child, and a secure bond has arisen between that child and that parent, we're going to protect that relationship, because removing that parent would harm the child. Currently in Massachusetts, this status has become kind of a quasi gray area, very confusing, hard for people to access, and only allows people to get visitation as opposed to full legal parentage with all the rights and responsibilities as well that entails. And there's really been a move throughout the country to make de facto parents equal legal parents. And 6 states have codified de facto parent status as equal legal parental status. And I've listed those on the slide. So this statute would ensure that de facto parents are equal legal parents, and would also improve upon what's currently happening in Massachusetts law, because the statutory standard is higher than the current standard. It has 7 factors that each must be proven by clear and convincing evidence. And it has protections for birth parents who may be survivors of domestic violence. So this is a protection to make sure that the children who have de facto parents aren't separated from those folks, but that we're not letting folks through this status who might be inappropriate, because again, the standard is quite onerous. Okay, and I think my time is up. I will just say in summary, here's just a summary of what the Parentage Act will do. You know, again, first and foremost, make sure our law is constitutional, and make sure that every child has the ability to access legal parentage, regardless of the marital status, gender, or sexual orientation of their parents. I will end with this happy picture of my daughter, Miriam, at the signing of the Connecticut Parentage Act on June 1st. She wore all of her pride gear. You can't see her rainbow knee-high socks. But, you know, just because I think that these bills in many states have been really joyous celebrations of the bipartisan efforts to make sure that children, our most vulnerable community members, are protected in any event. So thank you for listening, and I will turn it back over to Kate and Jay once I stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Paulie, so much. And I love that you ended with that photo. That is awesome. That was our legislative champion in Connecticut too, Rep. Jeff Curry, which you probably said, but it is so great. Thank you so much. I feel like I'm somewhat knowledgeable now about this bill, but I always learn something new. Some new things hit me during that presentation. So thank you, Paulie. And I'm sure others learned a lot from it too. So I am so pleased now to pass the mic to Jay, who has become a friend of this coalition and a valued member of this coalition. Again, as we've been saying all along, the children and families that are impacted by these outdated statutes are at the absolute center of our advocacy for this bill. So Jay, would you be kind enough now to just share your family's story with us?
Yes, no problem.
Thank you, Jay. And tell us more about yourself too. Give a shout out to your business too.
All right, well, my name is Jay. My last name is Shia. I want to start by saying thanks to Kate and Paulie and everyone at GLAAD for inviting me to chat. It's funny, as I'm sitting here listening to everything Paulie is explaining about this hopeful law, I'm like, oh man, that would have been really nice 5 years ago for my life, or that would have been really nice 10 years ago for my life. And as a parent myself, overhearing the potential of equality, I'm sitting here feeling excited for people in the future if this all goes the way we want. So I'll give a little introduction to myself and to my my life as a parent. My name is Jay again. My last name is Shia. I'm the owner of a small business in Boston, Madhouse Motors, where we build motorcycles, and I'm a single parent to an 11-year-old. This 11-year-old was born when I was 19 years old at Cambridge Hospital, and I was there with his biological mother when he was born. I actually named him. Now, this is when I was 19. I was kind of just a kid without resources really to figure out how to go about, being a legal part of his life. Now, fast forward, now I'm a young adult with all these resources. I still have a hard time figuring out how to be a legal parent, which is sort of why I'm here. So for his upbringing, and I can't kind of give the whole explanation of his life, but in a nutshell, his biological mother wasn't there for her own reasons, and so I was left to help take care of this kid and to raise him. Bring him to school. He was born 2 weeks before my first day of college with this young kid who I had no way of proving my relationship to. And no matter what I did or how often I was seen with him, every time I tried to bring him to a doctor's appointment or sign him up for daycare, or he has an ear infection or whatever it may be, every time I have tried, and even still to this day, 11 years later, trying to be a parent, I'm questioned on my parental status. So fast forward to when he's 5 or 6, social services starts to get involved, asking where the biological parent is. They get wind that he's being raised without his biological parent, and push comes to shove, he winds up back with the biological parent for a brief amount of time. And then within a week or so, he was in foster care for negligence. Now he's in foster care with a sibling of his, and I can't get him out, even though I've raised him since the day he was born, because I am a nobody. I'm not a parent, I'm not a grandparent, I'm not a foster parent. He wasn't up for adoption. I'm just this person who, by fact, as de facto, has raised this kid. With many thanks to Joyce Kaufman, who was my lawyer, who's a big part of this whole movement, we wound up digging into the court system and filing for myself as a de facto parent, even though Massachusetts doesn't really honor it. We're using the parameters of it being a de facto parent to prove that this kid was being parented by me. A year later, after him being in foster care and going back and forth to court, I'm finally granted guardianship. Guardianship, which I've realized now, is basically just being a glorified babysitter. The state still hasn't granted me to be a parent. I have basically no legal rights. I'm a glorified babysitter of a child who's still the ward of the state. This means I can't get any benefits for him. Every time I travel, in my wallet here, I have his guardianship form in case we're ever pulled over. We don't look the same. Every doctor's appointment, I need to, show who I am, health insurance, etc. for a kid that I have raised since the day he was born. Now, I'll give it a brief example of why a law like this would benefit someone like myself or other people. I recently filed for him to get a passport. He's a U.S. citizen, born in the U.S., who, by his right of being a citizen here, should be able to get a passport. It took me 6 months, going to court twice, getting social services involved, going to the post office 3 times, having notaries come with me to have the biomom stamp things. It took me all of these hoops to jump through to get a kid who was born in the US a passport, because I had no parental rights. I had to continue to go back to the biological parent, which seems completely backwards for a multitude of reasons, because I'm the one who's raising the child. And it's things like this, small things like this, that you wouldn't realize are such a monstrosity or a gray cloud over a parent's life, that a law like this would help. His school is asking for a passport. He's asking for identification. And I can't do this simply because this state doesn't view me as a parent. And it's moments like that have happened over the past 11 years that you would think in a progressive state like Massachusetts wouldn't happen. But it happens to me on the daily. I get pulled over for a blinker. I'm feeling insecure about who the kid is in the back, even though I raised him. They don't view me as a parent. And it's been a long road, and laws like this kind of make me excited for the future. And I hope that there's more movement and more push so that people like myself or surrogates or people in the LGBTQ community can stand next to their kid without feeling insecurity of being questioned legally. And yeah, it has my full support, and I think all my friends have full support, and that's just a tidbit of my story.
Well, thank you, Jay, so much. We really appreciate you sharing your story, and we really appreciate your resilience and determination to, unfortunately, you've had to jump through all these hoops, but the fact that you've jumped through them has kept your son out of the foster care system longer than he would have been, and has the consistent relationship with you as much as you've made possible. So we commend you and appreciate you for that, and for your determination for this bill. So I can think of no better segue to me talking a little bit about the advocacy steps we can take than hearing Jay's story, because hopefully, like me, you feel fired up now talking to her. And I wrote down what you said about the potential for equality is making me excited for the future. I'm tweeting that out later. So how can we help with this bill? Because this is not our first time filing this bill. And for many of the savvy political people on this webinar right now, you know that unfortunately we're not alone. It's, you don't always succeed the first time out, but the time is now. We have to do this session. And so I'm happy today to talk to you a little bit about what you can do to help pass the bill this session. So the Mass Parentage Act was reported to the Judiciary Committee, which has members from the House and the Senate on it. We don't yet know when the committee hearing is going to be, but it could be like within the next month, or it could be in several months. We unfortunately right now don't know, and don't even kind of have a sense. But the one thing we do know is that usually we don't have a lot of lead time. I think often, I would say it's within a week, sometimes less, that we hear a hearing is scheduled, and then we have to be ready for it. But the good news is we can all be working now on our written testimony for the hearing. We don't have to wait for, there's always last minute things we can fill in, like the date or something like that, but pretty much we can write the rest of it anytime. So probably my biggest takeaway today, two things. One is that you are not alone. Like I said, I know there are some people on this call that represent organizations and are very politically savvy, and feel very confident in this realm. And then I also know we have incredible, amazing families that are on this call that are very committed to this bill, but don't necessarily feel comfortable with political happenings. So probably my most important message is you are not alone. You are part of this coalition that is here to help you advocate in a way that's convenient for you, that's comfortable for you, and that you might actually enjoy. And I can practically promise you that you will. So one thing that we have to help you is, as I mentioned, our massparentage.com website has a testimony template on there. And the key word being template, which is that it's a great starting place for you to write your own letter. But we really encourage you to make it your own. Take that framework that's already there and really focus on your personal and professional connection to this issue. As we talked about earlier, that's the most compelling part. So yeah, the biggest thing is you're not alone, and start your testimony now, because we don't know when the hearing is going to be. So actually, truly, I'm not just saying this because I'm being a little bit of a taskmaster right now. I am starting my testimony tomorrow because I want to be ready when we hear that the hearing is going to be, and I don't want to be scrambling around to write it. So there's a few more things you can do. My first advice is to find out who your current state representative and state senator are. Sometimes people, they know I kind of do advocacy for a living, so they kind of confess to me, like, I don't know who it is. There's no shame. Sometimes they change. Sometimes, like I said, you maybe are not a very typically active political person. Whatever the reason, if you don't know who they are, there's no shame in it. But your first step is find out who they are. And even if you think you know who they are, double check, because maybe they've changed. So there's, I think our wonderful colleague Ivory, I think, is going to put in the chat a great website that you can go to find out who your legislator is. You can actually click on the map and get close, and then you can type in your actual address, and it gives you the link to the name of your state senator, the name of your state representative, and their contact information. I've also had people, again, no judgment, no shame, say, my senator is Elizabeth Warren. And I'm like, yes, I love her, but she is your US senator. We're talking Massachusetts law right now. So it's your state senator and your state representative that are really key for this bill. So find out who they are. And then you can access both the Senate and the House versions of this bill on the state website, which I think Ivory will also put in the chat, the links to those. So I highly recommend that you do that. If you want to read the whole bill, that's how you can do that. You don't need to do that. What I want you to do by going to those websites is to check and see if your rep or senator or both are already co-sponsors, because if they are, it just changes the messaging a little bit when you reach out to them. But your own legislators are the most important for you to reach out to, because you matter so much to them as their constituent, as someone who can vote for them, as someone who lives in their district, as someone who you may be just one person or one family, but obviously you have the whole network of others in your district that love you and your family. So your advocacy really represents your whole village that's around you. So you are very powerful to them, especially to your own rep and senator. So once you know if they're already a co-sponsor or not, that's helpful information. And then my next advice is for you to click on the Judiciary Committee. As I mentioned, that's where the bill has been sent. That's where it will have its committee hearing, which as of now, the committee hearings are still virtual. And so they will be held on Zoom. And so check that committee and see if your rep or senator is on that committee. If they are, let Paulie or myself know, because that is real, again, very powerful, because they are one of the key decision makers. The first step in the process is for this bill to have its hearing and then to be acted on by that Judiciary Committee. So, and then once you have this information, you know who to write to, you know if they are a co-sponsor or not, and you know if they are on the Judiciary Committee. If they're, so I'll just say briefly, but I think we'll put kind of sample emails up on the website. I think that'll be quick for me to do for you, but just briefly, it's very simple. It doesn't have to be a long message. But it's great to write to them and say, if they are already a co-sponsor, thank them very much for doing so. If they're not, you can ask them to co-sponsor this session. There's no deadline, or it's a very extended deadline to become a co-sponsor. So you can ask them to co-sponsor the bill, and you can ask them specifically to express their support for the bill to the Judiciary Committee. That is key. Like I said, the Judiciary Committee is where the action is right now for this bill. So the more that we can do that, that is great. And I did thank you for Caitlin for your note that I know several of us on this coalition, not myself, but several of you on this coalition have Senator Chang Diaz as your state senator, and she is on the Judiciary Committee, and she has announced that she's running for governor. So that is really key. So that's an action step, 2 action steps you can take right away. Start writing your own letter from the testimony template that's on our website. Because as I mentioned, the Judiciary Committee will have its virtual hearing for this bill at some point in the coming months. And really, there's no limit to how many letters we have. We will probably be strategic and careful around how many people verbally testify, because the committee greatly appreciates us being efficient with our time and not having 20 people say all the same things. So we're going to be very strategic about the verbal testimony, but there's really no limit to the number of letters. And as Paulie mentioned, in the other New England states where we've had success, we have had many letters from various distinct perspectives that have been so helpful and so effective. So start your letter now, and also please write to your state legislators, as I've described, and thank them if they're already supportive, or the most important thing is tell them why you care about this and why you want them to talk to the Judiciary Committee or reach out to the Judiciary Committee about how important this is to them as well. So those would be my big, I don't want to give you too much homework, but that would be the best things to do right now. And like I said, we're here to help you with that. I mean, this is one of my favorite parts of my job. And I know other people that I see on this call also love helping people to get comfortable and excited about advocating. So feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to read draft letters that people have written, and I very rarely change them at all because they're usually amazing, especially when they're from your heart. So, all right, I am going to shut up now. And because
I could echo something you said to say,
yes.
I think that's so true. Like, we are here to support. Like, we've got a very broad coalition, and we've got a lot of folks who are here to support. Some people, and I'll give the Connecticut example. Some people in Connecticut wanted to speak to me about their testimony, and so they had a call with me, and I wrote it down for them. And and that was what was easiest for them. Like, we're here to support you in getting your voice heard, and we particularly want people who have had experience with the harms or the benefits, or I spoke to a wonderful parent in Connecticut who was, a cisgender heterosexual woman who was like, I had no idea that I got treated, that my child's experience was different than my neighbors, and was really passionate about testifying. So anyway, we're here to help in any way we can. I put my email into the chat, and I know that the website has our emails as well. So however we can help you with testimony, we're here to do that.
Great. Yes, and also you all can help by spreading the word on social media as well. So the Mass Parentage Coalition has several different social media accounts that are in the chat. Mass Parentage on Twitter, Mass Parentage everywhere, basically, on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. So that's great. Social media best practice there, having the same name on all three. Maybe, I mean, Paulie, please, audience members, feel free to put questions into the Q&A box so that we can answer them in real time. And as I think Paulie said, we actually got some questions in advance, which was great. And so Paulie, I think you addressed some of them in advance, but just while we're waiting maybe for other people to put questions in the chat right now.
We got some fantastic questions in advance. I just want to thank you for, for folks for engaging with those questions. And one, I just want to emphasize, like, the goal is to give people options in terms of securing their children, right? So we want people to be able to sign voluntary acknowledgments. So at birth, at the hospital, they can protect their children. But we also want people to be able, if they want a court decree, to, under Article 7, they can go to court and under the assisted reproductive provisions and also get a court decree, right? And people can still access the adoption code if that's what's most comfortable for them. So one of the things the bill does is really make sure that no matter how you bring your child into your life, you have various options for how you want to secure your child. But the goal is to really make it as simple and straightforward and accessible as possible, and to obviate the need for co-parent adoption.
Agreed. Yeah. So one of the questions we got, I think I can kind of take, and then I'm going to, or actually a couple I think I can quickly answer, and then I might share a couple others with you, Paulie. But one was, people were asking, or someone was asking, whether the fact that Massachusetts is last in New England will kind of help or hurt us with the advocacy this session. And I'd love to hear anyone's thoughts who want to jump in, or even, our audience, feel free to give your thoughts in the chat. I think it helps us. Like I said, I think Massachusetts generally does the right thing around progressive issues, and I don't think they will like to be last in this respect. And so I think it helps us put some urgency on Massachusetts. They will take heart with what other New England states have done, and the care that has gone into creating this law and this bill, so that they can do the right thing. And someone else asked about whether we thought conservative religious groups might be against a bill like this, because it is about diverse families and diverse ways that families are formed. And I will knock on my fake wood desk here, but that has not been our experience. That Paulie and I have been doing a lot of this advocacy throughout New England, and fortunately that has not been a source of opposition, and we don't expect it to be in Massachusetts. And in fact, many I mean, the question asked specifically about conservative religious groups, but some religious organizations and entities obviously are very supportive of the rich diversity of families in the Commonwealth. So on the contrary, they're actually supportive of reform like this. Paulie, did you want to add?
I just want to echo that. I feel that throughout New England, we've really had just a really positive experience because the bills are really seen as they are, which is protecting children, right? It's not about the adults, to be honest, right? It's about children. And I've really had many conversations with really diverse legislators and constituents and organizations who really are focused on that and so positive and supportive. And I haven't received any opposition along those lines, which has been really wonderful.
Yeah.
And I want to go back to the last question, which is, I mean, obviously we won't be last in the country. We are last in our region. And I kind of feel like it is what it is. I mean, I went back today because I started my written testimony today, Kate. So I would be ahead of the game for this webinar. And I look back to, we last had our hearing about the bill in the prior session in September of 2019. And New Hampshire, Maine, Rhode Island, and Connecticut have passed bills expanding protections for parentage and equality for LGBTQ families since that time.
Yeah.
And so I just think it's just evidence of how important these protections are, and how it's the time.
Yeah. And I really reiterate how joyous it has been when these bills have passed, and how much I think legislators are looking for joy. I mean, we're all looking for joy anywhere we can find it, but legislators I was saying this morning, they, on a strategy call that we had, legislators get asked for a lot of things and they don't get thanked very much. And so, our coalition really values gratitude, and we will be expressing and have been expressing our gratitude to those that are supporting us. And we're happy to continually communicate with those that need more information to feel comfortable with this bill. I mean, this has always been and will always continue to be a collaborative process. So I think this is the kind of bill you can feel really proud of. And, like I said, Resolve New England, at the heart of Resolve New England are people that are struggling to become parents. And we've had a fertility insurance law in Massachusetts for over 30 years. And legislators still say that's one of their proudest votes, because they know passing a bill like that and passing a bill like this has made families stronger and has created families. I mean, that is a great thing. And that's why, you couldn't really see it under his mask, but that's why, like, Rep. Curry was smiling from ear to ear under that mask in that picture that Paulie showed. And he was not alone that day. I know that. So, all right. So I'm sorry, I'm chatting away, and maybe there are other questions in the chat, but I know one of the questions we got in advance, Paulie, was whether if the Mass Parentage Act becomes law, will people still need to do second parent adoptions? Is that something that would still be recommended, or?
Well, I think the hope is that we're moving away from that, right? That voluntary acknowledgments of parentage, which are the equivalent of a court decree of parentage, provide phenomenal security. That parentage judgments through the assisted reproductive technology statutes that don't have all the requirements of the adoption statutes are also a faster way to secure your children. That for those, I mean, if the people want co-parent adoptions, we want them to still be able to get them. But I think the hope is to move away from that and to really make sure that people can, from birth, easily, without going to court, secure their children.
Yeah. And related to that, once people have legal parent status in their home state, it should be recognized in all states after that. Is that right, Paulie?
Yes.
So
right.
That's great.
And that's why those, things that are equivalent to court decrees are so important, right? Because they should receive full faith and credit throughout the country.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we want to get for Jay and her.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, same thing. I got excited when when Paulie was presenting on behalf of Jay and a de facto parent who's very, very dear to me, a friend of mine, that just these legal protections will be so important for Jay and her son and for my friend and her family that they fought so hard for it. And Paulie, I know some people have questioned, again, just understandably trying to learn more about this, have questioned like whether sort of a nanny or, someone who drives a kid to school here and there could be considered a de facto parent. And isn't even there a provision in the bill that someone who is paid, like a paid nanny or a paid babysitter, is specifically not able to be deemed a de facto parent? It is a really hard standard to achieve. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. It's really designed for people like Jay, who have been, permanent caretakers for a child, held themselves out as a child's parent for a significant period of time. And in fact, there is language that says, paid caretaking does not qualify someone for the status, and you can't have the expectation of payment. There's really, again, in those 7 standards, a number of protections to make sure that what we're doing is really securing the relationship between a child and someone who has acted as their parent and held themselves out as that child's parent, not as their grandparent, not as their friend, not as their aunt, not as their uncle, but as their parent.
Right.
And another protection I think that's important to note is that establishment of de facto parent status doesn't disestablish biological parents, right? So it's not a either or. It's a securing that person, that parent to that child. It's not cutting anybody else off.
Yeah, that's great. Jay, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I mean, everything you guys are saying is, I don't know, it's so crazy to hear kind of my life story spoken so direct, because I've always fumbled on being able to explain it. But yeah, I mean, when speaking about the provisions of a de facto parent, I remember going to court with Joyce Kaufman and having to prove that I was a primary parent since the start, not a babysitter, not a friend who hung out with the kid every once in a while, not a neighbor, to prove that I was there as the primary parent since start, not co-parenting. And I understand that people could feel a hesitation, worrying, oh, well, what about my buddy who's helped take care of the kid? I'm, as someone who's experienced it, it was not that easy going through the court system doing this. I had to prove, almost down to the day, down to the week of my relationship with this kid through photographs, through doctor's notes. I had to prove my de facto parent status by proving that I was a parent, in fact, since the start. And so any hesitation on gray areas of being de facto parent, I feel like has been weeded out. And I can kind of attest to that from firsthand, that yeah, it definitely gets vetted for any nonsense, for any any fear that maybe people on the oppositional side could see. And yeah, I mean, being granted an actual parent opens up all the doors that I feel like we deserve, just for a lack of better words.
Yeah.
It would make the kid's life a lot easier. That's the other thing. It's as much as I want to be called a parent, and other people in the LGBTQ community and other de facto parents want to be called a parent, it's really about the kids. Because my kid gets questioned in front of me and in front of them all the time, who is your parent? And I say me, and it gets questioned legally in court, doctors, etc. So we'll see how it goes. Fingers crossed.
So I thank you so much, Jay. Thank you. And thank you, Paulie. So I see a question in the chat, but maybe Paulie, I don't know if you're answering it in writing or if you want me to pose it to you. I think that will probably end with just, oh, did you answer it already?
I answered it in writing, sorry.
Oh, that's fine.
But
yeah.
No, it was a great question. I answered it in writing. I think, right, even with a marital presumption of parentage, you do want to kind of do a belt and suspenders approach of having either a voluntary acknowledgement, which is the equivalent of a court decree, or a court decree of parentage, so that you, for non-biological parents, you're 100% secured. So that's,
Great.
I did
Great.
type an answer. But
Yes, no, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jay, for sharing your story and being such a tremendous advocate throughout for this bill. Yeah. And to all the families, because there's so many different families in the coalition, and I know we only shared one story today, but
and there's more stories on the website as well. I meant to mention that earlier. Really, the website, massparentage.com is really the hub for a lot of information, and we'll keep putting information on there. Like I said, I can even put a short little sort of email template for example of how you might write to your rep and senator if they were already a co-sponsor, or if they're on the Judiciary Committee. We'll kind of put a few little examples up there. Like I said, we're just trying to make it as easy and convenient for you as possible to take action in whatever way feels comfortable to you, because really this is the time. That's why we're doing this now. Is we don't know when the hearing's going to be, but it's probably going to be in the next few months, and we want to be ready. So thank you all so much. Thank you to my fellow panelists and all the people helping here on the screen and behind the scenes today. And like I said, we look forward to having a future meeting in a more, well, it's like a dream to think about a meeting in person someday. But in the meantime, we will have a meeting on a more traditional Zoom where we can at least see everyone and talk in a more interactive way. But I enjoyed doing this today, and really thank all of you for being involved. And I hope you can stay cool this evening, and that we'll be together in the future soon. So thank you. Take care. Bye.